So we will give this a shot and see how this goes. Let me see if I can actually move this closer to me so I'm not bouncing all over the place. I'll just have a strange little black blob below me, but that's okay. Because when I first got the message from you saying, "Hey, can we do this via Zoom?" I cussed you for about 10 minutes.
Sorry, we didn't have, that was just a question. You didn't have to do that.
No, we can give it a shot, because then the video can come out for everybody that's in the upper levels, and then the lower level can have just the audio, and that's perfectly fine. But my Mondays go along the lines of this. I drag my out of bed, come straight to the computer, and have to compile 2 massive reports before I do an hour-long conference call every week. And so I wasn't like, I have a hat on. I still look like warmed over death, basically, you know.
You look great. You look fantastic.
Well, thanks.
And that's the beauty. You know, you can put a baseball hat on. You're a beekeeper, right? So, and then you hide. That's my biggest problem, is hiding my hair that's sticking straight up half the time.
Well, that's why I was like, oh God, like I didn't shave. I didn't comb my hair. I'm not wearing appropriate clothing.
Yeah, I don't have to shave, so that's good. But I was out already. I had an appointment earlier, so I had to look presentable for the public.
There you go. That works. I did not have to look presentable until I figured out we were doing Zoom. And then I was like, oh.
Sorry.
So I had to put my phone on silent because it is constantly going off. People on social media are having a meltdown at the moment.
What did I miss?
Well, the last episode of the beginner beekeeping track of the Hive Jive was just released this morning.
Okay.
And so it was our farewell send off to Ken and his journey up through this point. And there is, for anybody out there listening who has listened to the episode but maybe didn't do this last part, there is an epilogue at the end of it. So once the outro music plays and fades out, there's about 15 seconds of silence, and then it starts back up. So if you didn't catch that, go back and listen to that part as well. That may at least quell some of your anxiety. We have messages running the gamut from like, oh my God, you can't do this to me. I just got caught up. You can't end the show. Another individual was like, I read this and nearly barfed. Like,
there's a lot of traumatic reactions there.
There was, and that's very flattering. I greatly appreciate that. It's that's awesome. But as you can tell, if you are here with us on Patreon, if you are at the Hive Jive Junkie level, you can still hear us. And if you're at the Bee Academy level, for better or worse, you can see us.
That's right, with the baseball hat and everything.
That's right. I am
or unshaved. I
am in line with the show. I have Hive Jive up there at least. My shirt somewhere on here has wicked bees.
Something of bees. Yes,
I'm representing both.
I'm very neutral today. I don't even have Be Mindful, Hive Jive, anything. I'm just,
you don't have anything on.
Plain. Yeah.
Oh,
yes, I do.
Well, I didn't mean like that. For the record, I can see you do have clothing on. That was not what I meant.
Not cool, man. Not cool.
Not cool. I'm trying to get us a new subscriber base, okay? If they can't see what I'm talking about, they'll never know.
Come to me for my competence level.
Oh, I'm telling you, you and I have had some very entertaining conversations in the past when it comes to social media and followers and things like that. And I do think I am going to start being a little bit ballsy.
More vocal?
No. They're all tongue in cheek. Okay. They're all tongue in cheek. But I do think that here, not necessarily in the next few weeks or few months, but down the road, I've got a few ideas in mind of some videos that I'm going to put out. Ooh. And they're going to be hopefully funny and hysterical.
I know what you're going to do.
There's one. Yeah, there's one that I think you and I did talk about where I'm going to let some people do a makeover on me. No, I'm not going to give it all away. I'm going to let some people do a makeover on me. But Kevin had a hysterical idea like a year or two ago. And I talked to you about this too, when we were talking about how like some of the female beekeepers and stuff out there, you know, they're always wearing the tight clothing and doing this, and they've got thousands and thousands of followers, you know, and I'm like, well, I'm in it just for like, hey, this is what we're doing, and let me talk to you about the show, and let me teach you about bees, but apparently that doesn't get the likes or the follows, and I'm not gonna
be counterculture.
Exactly.
You know, my plan, I was thinking about that when I was in the bees the other day. I was like, and I'm going to unveil that for the Hive Jive people. But basically my plan is I'm going to be counter. I'm going to be wearing all my gear, my gloves, my thing. And I'm going to talk about how we need to encourage people, and there's no shame. We're not trying to one up anybody. We're not trying to show off. What we should be known for is our competence level and our knowledge of the bees, not what we look like.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. Now, competence level, though, may go out the window for one of these videos because it's priceless. Now, it's going to be a little while, so I'll go ahead. I'll tell everybody about this specific one. I told you about this. Oh God, I think back at like a Travis County Beekeepers meeting a long time ago.
Yes.
But Kevin had this brilliant idea to see how much attention people were paying to have me up front in proper beekeeping attire, talking about the importance of how you need to be aware of your surroundings and things you should take into consideration whenever you're doing your bees. Exactly. In the background is a shirtless, muscular individual doing yard work or some other various task. And so like while the video is going on, you know, it's like, oh, it's hot out here. It takes his shirt off and all this other stuff. And the whole while the person, me up front, has no idea what's going on behind them. And they're like, you really need to be careful because your neighbors could be out. This could be going on, you know, and here's this person back there like, I
remember that. Yeah, yes. That's a great idea.
So I think there may be some things in the future that may be a little bit tongue in cheek like that may be entertaining. We'll see.
That's not like you to have a sense of humor anyway.
Never. I sit here and I have to edit myself most of the time.
You get carried away?
Sometimes, yeah. And I also get carried away with the 4-letter words. The biggest one, the F-bomb, is probably my favorite thing to say.
I said I'm going to get stung all the time. Yeah,
exactly. I actually, I said this on the podcast a little bit, maybe a couple episodes ago. But we have a new neighbor who does arc welding and works with metal all the time. Nice. And you can hear him out there, ow, bleep, 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 bleep. And I went over to him and I was talking to him the other day and I said, you know, that sounds a lot like me when I'm working a defensive beehive. Right. I'm working through stuff and I get stung and you hear a yelp and a 4-letter word and then I just keep on. And the more we talked, the more we were like, oh my God, you're right. It's the same thing, because if he's holding something that he's trying to weld together, even though he's got multiple layers of protection on, those hot embers and metal still burn through and sting him, and he still yelps and says 4-letter words, but he can't let go and he can't stop what he's doing.
Right.
And I was like, wow, that was an interesting parallel that I would have never drawn to a beekeeper and somebody that works with metal all the time.
Can't drop those bees either. You
drop that frame. It's like setting off a bomb.
It's like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden much more yelps and F-bombs.
Yes, lots. I had a brilliant moment, and I did mention this on the last episode.
One brilliant moment.
One.
Just teasing.
Just one. For those of you who can't see, she held up a finger and I thought she was telling me to stop. And I was like, okay, yes, I'm sorry. So I had one brilliant moment here where we were doing a removal. And like Ken was talking about, Ken gets stung. Ken gets stung all the time. And so in his chin. And I didn't want him to feel too bad. So I was telling him the story about Jorge and I out doing a removal here very recently. And Jorge hasn't been on the job site in quite a while. He hasn't done a removal in a while. And he got stung in the finger and he was up at the top of the ladder. And I mean, like the hive tool went zinging past my head and like something else, the hose, I think for the back, flew off the other side of the ladder. He lets out a tirade of like curse words as he comes scrambling down the ladder and he's holding his finger and he's like, oh my God, why does that hurt so bad? He goes, I've been stung in the effing face and it didn't hurt that bad. Like, what is wrong with this? And we had this whole little conversation. And then about 15 minutes later, he got stung in the face. And I was like, that was
shouldn't
karma.
laugh.
That was karma for you saying you got stung in the face and didn't hurt that bad. So they're reminding you. And then I went to the truck to get a drink. And of course, I have to unzip the veil, flip it up so I can drink, put it back down. And all I did was fold down the Velcro. I didn't pull the zippers back in place.
It's happened to me with a very defensive hive. And then you have 12 bees crawling on your face.
I do it way more often than I would care to admit. I don't know why. I get that drink, I pull it back down, I smooth the Velcro out, and I walk off. I don't know, but I went back up the ladder and I felt the wings of a bee go zip right up the side of my ear. And I was like, that's
Too
not
close.
good. And
Yeah,
I
too
reached
close.
over and I grabbed it and I pulled it away so that it couldn't get me. And I climbed back down the ladder. And then I was telling him, I was like, I need you to check me. I've got a hole in my suit somewhere. And as I looked down, I could see it's all open down here. And I was like, oh man, never mind. I didn't zip it. And so now I got to make sure I got this bee. And I turned my head and pulled the suit away, which put my ear right against the other side. And they stung me through the veil on the ear. So we both ended up getting stung in the head. Of course, we had lots of stings in the hands and whatnot. But I told Ken, I was like, don't feel bad. That day, we all took one to the face in some area or another.
Yeah, no, and you know what? I got stung on the lip one time. I had removed my veil, and apparently there were still bees in the car, and I didn't really feel it. And then that was right before the chat with the mindful beekeepers, and everybody was like, you're fine. Your lip's not swollen the size of a banana.
Yeah, it's and Jorge's didn't swell up either. He was right here, right underneath his lip. And it ended up looking like he had like an ingrown hair, like just an irritated area, small little knot, but his lip didn't swell up. And
when you get stung enough times, that's what happens, right?
It can definitely change. Now, there was an article, and we're not going to talk about this today because I think it would actually be cool to go into more depth about it down the road. But there was an article recently about, oddly enough, Australian bees. And the more agitated, aggressive bees have a stronger, more potent venom because there's more individual protein strains in that venom. There's more of the protein and there's more varieties of the protein in the venom, and it actually packs more of a punch. And they're looking at it from like a medical perspective to go through and see, could this be used for different treatments and things like that? And I'm like, wow. So if some of the Australian bees that are in a bad mood have that potential, I wonder what our Scutellata genetic, Texas redheaded mutts.
Because what we always thought that, what I've always heard is that their venom is not more potent. It's just there are more of them. They're more defensive. So as a general rule, more of them end up stinging you. If anything, they're smaller bees as a general rule. So they should not inject as much venom. Right. It's interesting to hear that in Australia, the defensive bees are basically packing more of a punch.
They do. They pack more of a punch. And it changes with the temperature. It changes with the climate. And it changes with how agitated they are at the moment. So you can have a colony that in the right circumstances doesn't have as much of an effect and doesn't have as much of that protein. But that same colony later under different circumstances could actually have more an effect than it did previously. So I thought that was really actually interesting.
It's very interesting. And the question also is, how fast can they switch those levels? Is it instantaneous, or is it over season or periods of time, specific, cycles of the superorganism that they do that? Or is it just as a reaction? Like, can they dial it in?
Right. I would almost say that it would have to be not necessarily instantaneous, but something that they can probably pull off within a matter of minutes.
Right.
Because if they've gotten agitated enough and they've got themselves worked up to that point,
revved up,
they could then be generating that extra protein. But they have a venom sac, and you would think that venom sac also already has some in it. So how does that sway and change?
That's very interesting. Yeah, I would love to see what the research is on that.
Yeah. We'll dig into that a little bit deeper another day here. So, and I have said a lot. I think I've said more than you've said so far.
That would be a victory for me. I have an excuse too.
It's true, you do. I don't, other than it's a Monday morning. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking with it.
That's fine.
I also was not necessarily fully prepared. So we've got this beautiful geisha screen behind me for those of you that can see. For those that can't, it's a white window kind of room divider type thing. And it's got red cherry blossoms and vines and stuff, or tree limbs and stuff on it.
Very
so
Japanese looking.
Yes. In the future, when we are doing these, and I am actually prepared for it, there will actually be my Hive Jive honeycomb background behind me.
Oh, there you go.
But honestly, I mean, it doesn't really necessarily matter. I save that for more official videos.
But I like the screen idea. That's a very good idea. Like I don't have a background right now because my computer doesn't have the power to do that. So it's just my dark closet.
That works. That works. You got some nice closet doors going on back there. Bedroom door over there with a nice little hat. It's all good.
That's right. It's my office. Yeah.
Your office door. Yeah. So I got another message from somebody that said, wow, that affected me emotionally more than I would have expected. Aw.
So what's the plan? How do we remedy this?
Well, so for everybody who is actually listening, so the Hive Jive itself that was kind of a funny thing to say. That was like redundant for everybody who is actually listening. Well, if you can hear my voice, you're listening. So duh. For all of you who are Patreon members who are listening to us today, let me put it that way. The show it's going through metamorphosis, and I at the moment do not have any idea what season 4 will look like, but I can tell you there will be a season 4. Now, Ken will not be a prominent part of season 4 because he has wrapped up his journey on that beginner beekeeper level. There may be a guest appearance every once in a while where Mr. Milam will join us and maybe provide us with another wonderful recipe that is not in any semblance of a logical order whatsoever.
I'll give you an update on what's going on after he's left the coop, basically.
Give us an update on how things are going with him and his brother taking care of his hives for him, and him doing the fishing guide stuff. And he is working on a new podcast that will be geared more towards hunting and fishing and cooking. Okay. And so we can get some updates on those things as time allows and goes forward. But here on Patreon, we're going to just have some chats, and we're going to go through and talk about some interesting topics and details, and use that time to also go through and kind of figure out the format for the next season of the show, which will then start releasing on the main platform down the road. Everybody here on Patreon also, you should have received messages from me, multiple messages depending on your level, either telling you to change your tier. If you're in the top tiers, change your tier so you're actually benefiting from the discounted price. For the lower tiers, there was messages out there about the bonus episodes are going away. And the key word with that is quote unquote bonus. So the bonus episodes previously with Ken and I, there are 83 of them here on Patreon. They're going to slowly start being deleted and removed from the system as they're released on the live platform. So they're going to be published out there for everybody to hear, probably 2 episodes a week. Maybe, I don't know, at least 2, probably 2. I think I should say at least 1, probably 2, maybe 3. I don't know, but they're going to start being released out there to the general public. And as we release them to the general public, I'm going to remove them from the Patreon feed so that we can start kind of cleaning up some room and making it to where when new people join, if they've been listening to the podcast on the main platform, they're not also like, oh, well, the only thing in here is the stuff that I've just heard or already heard. So that's going to start going away. And we're going to have these weekly chats where we're going to sit down and talk about a whole slew of various topics and kind of see where it goes. And that will kind of bridge the gap. But in the background, we are working on more items to go out there. And as soon as Nathalie and I can actually nail down some free time, we're going to do some videos as well, some training and education videos to add to the collection. And I've got a couple of tutorials that will actually be coming out on the training platform probably in the next week at the most from the time that you hear this. So those will be out there. As far as deeper dive episodes go, let me know some specific topics that you all would like to hear or have more information on. and we can add those to the roster. Ones that I think would be good for the solo deeper dives, I will queue over for that. And ones that I think may be better in a conversational format, then we'll bring up here and we'll talk about on one of these weekly episodes. I think the release date on these is going to be Wednesdays, I think. Traditionally, the episodes on Patreon were coming out on Thursdays.
Oh.
And so,
oh yeah, on Patreon. Mondays
on
was
Patreon.
the Hive Jive.
Monday was the regular Hive Jive episode. And I think Monday and Thursday will be those bonus episodes. And then Wednesday here on Patreon for these new ones are going to be Wednesday. I think that's the plan. So in a nutshell, that is pretty much kind of where we're at and what is going on. And this is just a little introductory, kind of get you up to speed on everything Hive Jive related. And we're going to go through, we've got a couple of, let me actually look here for people watching this video. You get to see all the behind the scenes stuff because I can't edit that out.
And yeah, because it's on video now.
It's on video.
While you're looking at that, I wanted to let you know, John, that I'm working on a whole lot of content gathering videos when I'm carrying my GoPro and I'm getting stuff from being in the hives. I'm going to do cutouts of that owl box that I haven't done yet.
Damn owl box.
Yeah. And a whole bunch of other things. So we'll be able to use some of that if you're interested.
Very cool. I think that would be great. And we can go through and put those things up as we can stitch all kinds of things together, create all kinds of different training videos for it. I think that would be perfect. So one of the, we could actually maybe, so there's not a timer on here like there is when I do the audio. So I have no idea.
It's 24.
24 minutes?
25.
Okay. 25 minutes. Oh, hey, it's the time.
Yeah, exactly, because we started right on the top of
right
the
on
hour.
the dot. Okay, so we're gonna go through and we'll do some just little preliminary Q&As here on this episode.
Sounds good.
And then coming up on the next two episodes, we're going to talk about the business of beekeeping. That's going to be one episode coming up here soon. And another one is going to be the pitfalls of beekeeping. And so we'll talk about that. And so these are going to be some of the topics, and these are going to evolve and change as we go through. But the whole goal and concept is going to be to have a higher level discussion about bees and beekeeping. And obviously, as you've heard, there's been quite a bit of laughter through the very whole first part of this. So there will still be some entertainment mixed in with your infotainment along the way.
We can't help it.
No, we just can't. So sorry. Okay, so question-wise, to round out today's episode, on the final episode with Ken, I did go back and ask him some recap questions just to get his opinion of how things went. So I am going to pose 3, maybe 4 questions to you. Just so, I don't know why, just because it was fresh on my mind and it was kind of a fun little transition over here. So number 1, when you got started in beekeeping, what was, like, now that you've been doing it for a while and you look back on it, what is maybe one misnomer or one thing that you would not have expected when you first got started?
I would say how much simpler it can be than what people tell you, which is paradoxical because people tell you it can be simple. You just put bees in a box and you get going. It turns out it's actually much more complicated than that. But very often what happens is that beekeepers that train you will tell you, well, you need to know about all this. You need to do all this. You need to have all this stuff. And that's probably what's relating to the most, is that you need to have all that equipment that you absolutely do not need to have. It can be so very simple and basic from that standpoint that I'm amazed at the catalogs of equipment and the marketing behind all this and what people are doing in the beekeeping industry to try to get people to buy their stuff.
Yeah.
And that's probably what's the most revealing to me, is that you don't really need any of that stuff. You can keep it very simple. You can have dishwashing gloves. You can have a knife or a hive tool. I'm sorry, I do that all the other day I went in with a spoon. That kind of tells you I had lost my hive tool, and I went in with a spoon. I was like, oh well, that's what I have to do. But the very minimum that you need to have is your veil covering your face. And I would say, actually, even beyond that, a jacket. And to feel comfortable, you don't have to show off, and just kind of get covered whatever you want to get covered. Once you've got that and you've got some basic knowledge, that's not that hard. You don't need all the other stuff. And of course, I'm doing top bar beekeeping, so that's even simpler, right? I don't have to have tons of frames. I don't have to have tons of boxes or covers or whatever, an extractor. I don't have to have all this stuff. So personally, I think that was the biggest revelation, is that it can be super simple.
It can, absolutely. That is a great perspective. And it is completely contradictory to what everybody would necessarily think and how it would go. Now, one of the things of course, you know me, I like to have a little side tangent because random things will pop in my head.
Well, I'm also curious about what's your revelation.
So I think I mixed way too many things together, and it has overcomplicated how simple it could be.
Right.
Because I've got so many different things going on. So I absolutely see exactly what you had said. I spent a weekend doing, oh God, I don't even know how long ago this was. Before Les moved to Texas, he came down here and he did a weekend long seminar, and I spent the whole weekend with him.
Yeah, I was going to say, less is the key to that statement.
Yes.
It's the core there.
And I spent the whole weekend with him going through and learning directly from him how to do all this different stuff. And from that point, I was like, Langstroth hives be damned. I am getting rid of all this stuff because I don't have room for all of it. I don't want to have to keep buying stuff. This is so much more simplistic. Yes. And so I actually had it at one point to where all of my colonies were top bars and only 5 of them were Langstroths. And then this bizarre thing happened as I ended up being the president of the local association for the county, and then eventually a director for the state, and then eventually the vice president for the state. I started getting phone calls, especially like even with the podcast itself. I would get phone calls and messages from people in the local area. Hey, you know, my son started this project and he's now gone off to college, or I got into this, but the bees got too aggravated and I'm afraid and I don't want to keep going, or I found out I'm allergic after the fact and I can't keep this hive. And so people started giving and donating all of these Langstroth colonies to me. And I watched the numbers start growing, and then that little balance of like, yay, all top bar. And all of a sudden it started going back this way.
Langstroth.
And I was like, no, I have a storage unit now that is on permanent rental because I don't have space for all of the stuff that goes with it. So, but then I also started doing like the removals and all this other stuff. And there is plenty of times that I'm out there doing a removal and I stop and I'm like, oh my God, what on earth have I gotten myself into? This shit's for the birds. Like, I'm too old for this. It's too hot out here. Like, you know, just any number of things go through my head because I find myself in some ridiculous situations sometimes that it shouldn't, at first thought and first evaluation, shouldn't have been that complicated. And then you find out that there's some weird thing with the structure or whatever. So yeah, there was a lot of stuff that goes along with that. And with all of it mixed together, it does make it a little muddled for me. I definitely would love to have the simplicity. And I said this in one other episode too, where I said, if you have just 1 or 2 hives, beekeeping can be a very zen, beautiful experience. If they're your bees and you know them and you keep them under control and it's all good, you can go out there and just zone out and the world melts away and it's beautiful.
Absolutely.
But then the more colonies you get, the more work it becomes. Even if you don't have a lot of equipment, going and checking 2 hives is way different than checking 10, which is way different than I've got to check 20 hives every day kind of thing. Exactly.
Checking hundreds. Yes.
Exactly. And then it's like, you know, I found myself at one point where I would go out and I would do a removal every day of the week. I would then have to take that hive out to the removal yard, drop it off, check the hives out there to make sure they look decent, even if it just like a cursory glance. then I would have to stop by one of the main apiary sites and
Mhm.
touch a minimum of 10 hives every single day, just
Right.
so that at the end of the week, I have checked all of my hives.
Right.
And that was my breaking point of where I stopped and said, okay, you cannot have more than 50 hives unless you're going to hire a staff, because
Mm.
you just can't do it. You can't keep up with it.
So the difference is that I go in there every 2-3 weeks instead of every week.
Right.
So that allows me to have hundreds instead of, and then I work with less.
Yep.
And I did end up hiring somebody to help out. So
Yay!
yay! And then she got COVID.
I was just getting ready to say, is she okay? Because I do
She's
remember that.
fine. Yeah, she's
Okay.
fine.
Very
Yeah,
good.
but
Damn
still,
COVID.
I mean, yeah. So it, that's okay, because this season, at certain point, there's a tipping point where it gets to be the craziness of the spring is behind you. Then there's a lull with the dearth, and
Yep.
then it starts a little bit more in the fall as you prepare your hives for the winter. But I'm getting to the point where things are stabilizing, so that's good. But yeah, I would say if you have hundreds of hives that you're managing, whether them being yours or that of your customers, it adds up really fast. And before you know it, every week, that's all you're doing is
Yep.
getting into bees. But I will say, when you go into top hives, you can do 16 colonies in an hour, or an hour and a half. You
Yeah.
cannot do that with a Langstroth.
No.
Especially if you're doing a real inspection and then you're going in and you have to lift the bottom boxes and pull out all those frames. It's just kind of so much more time consuming. So for the sake of having so many beehives to manage, I'd rather have them all be in top bars.
Yep. I absolutely, I said that 4 years ago, and I still agree today.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Okay. So the second question that I asked him to follow up from the first one was, what do you think is the most difficult aspect of beekeeping? And this may overlap a little bit of our conversation that we just had, but what do you think is the most difficult aspect of it for you?
Well, I think it depends again on your goals and what you're doing, right? So for me, it's having enough time to manage all those colonies that I have, but that's not what everybody experiences. I would say for the when you get started and you don't have as many colonies, I would say finding the right kind of information and something that you can trust, because like we always say, you ask 10 beekeepers a question and you get 20 answers. And
Facebook's the devil.
and Facebook and YouTube. So
yes,
you got,
and YouTube, absolutely YouTube. Yes.
and the other aspect of things is that you end up with most of the advice out there is from commercial beekeepers whose goals are completely different. So they tell you to do things like trading, feeding, splitting, doing all this stuff, which you don't really need to do. So as far as I'm concerned, what was the most difficult is finding a good source of information that was no nonsense, that was not going to push me to do things commercially when I was just a backyard beekeeper. Excuse me, I have allergies. And that was really hard to do, which is kind of why I created my own club, right?
Yep.
Even there's 2 clubs in town, and they were at the time still pushing quite a bit. I mean, one of them up north was more treatments. The one in the center of city was more just regular, and there was talk of treatments and there was talk of everything. But what I wanted to do is really promote the natural beekeeping, and so I ended up starting my own club and getting educated. And that was not the most difficult part, because you get a master beekeeper program that's really good. I got the chance to meet with Les, who's my mentor, my friend. And so that was a great source of information for me, but I got lucky. So it's not always the case. It's kind of difficult to find the right kind of education and information.
That's absolutely true. And that was one of the reasons of the podcast, is because you find people out there that don't have any neighbors that have bees, don't know anybody in their county that has bees, doesn't have that resource to go out and go to a meeting or mentor along somebody and do inspections together to kind of learn and see different aspects. And so the podcast was designed to originally go through and try to help in those regards where it could. And yeah, it's kind of funny. Also, one of the things that's really funny from the different perspective, and I will bring this up again in a moment as an answer to another question, but without saying it verbatim. We had a listener at one point get mad and left the show because I had made a political remark
Oh,
about our local senator bailing and leaving the state whenever the state froze. And the funny thing was the listener was in Pennsylvania, so had nothing
oh,
to do with
with
Texas.
local politics. Yeah.
Didn't really need to be, that concerned and invested in what was going on in another state entirely far away. But I made a comment that I said, I didn't agree with it. I won't repeat the words that I had said, but I said, I didn't agree with it. And Ken didn't agree with it either. Ken was the one that actually had brought it up before the show and had been ranting about it because Ken had been without power at that time
Oh
for
yeah.
5 days. And they couldn't take a bath. They had no water. They had no electricity. They were, down in one of the little cabins that had gas powered stoves with the oven and stove on so that they could have heat. And when he looked at it and he was like, wow, thanks for abandoning me and leaving me out here like this while you run off to a beautiful paradise, And so I brought it up to give him the opportunity to express, invent this
Himself.
and somehow it turned around to where that was just 100% my idea and not him at all, which is fine. But that individual, when they left, they actually made the comment about how I really didn't like John and the propaganda that he was spewing and pushing anyway. And I was just in it for Ken. And I really, really like Les and Natalie's approach way better. And I was laughing to myself because I was like, if you only knew how close we all are together and how much we work together.
That's
and
right.
The podcast itself has to be generic, at least the whole first half of it. It has to be generic because I can't talk about just this one thing because then I alienate all these other people. So you have to include all of it in there. But I found it so amusing to myself because I was like, you have no clue. None.
We are very good friends and we talk a lot, and it turns out our ideas align quite a bit. So,
they do.
Yeah.
Yes. So when I heard the propaganda that he pushes and all this other stuff, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna let you have that one.
No, I will say though, this is what I will say. I get less to when we have classes. Sometimes he'll start by making some comments and general comments and all that stuff, and then at some point he'll go into a political tangent, and I'm like, yanking on his shirt, and I'm like, less, no politics, no politics.
That politics should never be included whatsoever. And in the entire life of the show, we had politics mentioned at extremely high levels, very briefly, like less than 5 times.
That's the best way to inflame the conversation and have people get mad at each other and walking out, stomping their feet. It's not
throwing a fit, leaving the whole show.
Away from that.
It was entertaining though.
It always is.
That was actually probably the most we had ever went into it, and it was because it was more about the freeze and the state losing all of the power.
It was very traumatic. It was the emotions were raw at the time. We suffered from this. It was really bad.
Come on, guys. We live in Texas. It's hot. We don't know how to deal with all that cold weather.
I lived 3 years in Africa, plus some time. I lived in the Caribbean. I left Ohio because I didn't want snow on the ground on the 1st of May. I went to Texas for a reason.
Right.
It's not to have that kind of, experience.
Right. Les was in Southern California. He was in New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, Jamaica.
We're not.
None of those places have ice storms that take out all the power.
I love our Canadian friends, but that's not my kind of weather.
That's right. Me either. I am a warm weather bird, and I will continue migrating south.
If it gets colder where we are.
That's right. If climate change continues and Texas becomes more of a true 4 seasons and lots of cold, I will have to find somewhere further south.
We'll be in trouble when the water rises at the coast. So.
That's true. That is true. We were looking at the East Coast the other day, and I actually went back and pulled up a map to overlay it and say, how far in is the water going to come if it should ever rise? Because I need to know where my boundary is.
Decisions.
I know.
So what's your third question?
Third question. What is your favorite aspect of beekeeping?
Being with the bees. I mean, there's so many things actually. I mean, this is why it's a passion. It's addictive. It's a complete, just suck your entire time, because there's several things that I love about the bees. Being in the bees is probably the most important ones. You forget everything. You just have to think about things, to be able to tune into what's going on. There's an energy that's coming out, and also you end up using all your senses, and you dive and you forget the rest of the world. So that's probably my most favorite part. I would say though, the other things that I like is the community, the friends that I've made along the way. That's amazing. And the especially you and Les, and Les is amazing, and he's got that view on the world and the bees, and he's got that connection. And I'm always in awe of what he says and his stories. So that's very fulfilling. There's also the honey.
I mean,
I
there's
love the
that.
honey. I mean, there's that. I love eating the comb, bite into a piece of comb with honey, and it's just kind of decadent. I love when there's a little bit of pollen in it. I just, one of my earliest experiences of helping out when I was training, I was helping out a bigger beekeeper, and I went into, for the first time, dozens and dozens of hives. And I went to my Chinese class afterwards, and I was sitting there, and I was like, I can still smell it. I'm on a high. The vapors, kind of like the smells of the hive, just completely, I was high.
Yep.
So I think that's what it does when you get into a hive. It's mental, it's emotional, it's almost spiritual. It's just kind of a connection and an experience like no other.
Yeah, the aromas that can come out of a colony can be both exhilarating and intoxicating.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I had a video that I posted on social media for Wicked Bee Apiary a while back where I was delivering the final nukes for the year, and they were actually inside the bed of the truck, or inside the cab of the truck, because it was too hot to put them in the bed. And as I'm driving and the air is circulating, all of a sudden I get this smell of the bee bread and the brood and the fresh nectar that had just such a sweet smell to it. And it was all just mixed together. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, and I believe that the propolis vapors, that they are using to basically sanitize their brood's nests, and it's a vapor that's kind of like hanging out in the brood's nest. I think that those smells also do something to you. So,
well, in Italy, they have actual stations.
Slovenia.
Where they, well, in Slovenia? I know in Italy, I was gonna say, I know in Italy, they have little stations where you can go in, and it, instead of like an oxygen bar, it's a beehive bar, and you can breathe the air directly from the hives.
Somewhere I have a mask. I'm going to do that. I'm going to build a little cabin with a bed where you can rest on it.
That's right.
And listen to the hum and smell all the stuff. And I'm going to plug in that mask, and it comes with a little motor where you kind of like propel the smells from the hive, and you use that as a therapy.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I love that. Yeah.
Exciting things to come in the future. That's awesome. Okay. So for me, my favorite aspects of beekeeping is, one, that being able to zone out and get lost in the moment, that Zen aspect. And I find that a lot when I'm out at the apiary, it's the end of the evening, or I'm at my home apiary and I'm looking at one of the two hives in the backyard. It's the end of the evening. The sun is getting close to setting. It's that golden hour, everything. That's my favorite time of day anyway. And so that already sets the mood. And then I'm in there looking at something, and the hive is all calm. And I lose track of everything, all time, everything. So that's the number one. The number two is I am constantly both learning and surprised. Constantly. Doing the removals, I have seen so many bizarre situations, and it's always intriguing to me when I'm getting ready to open something up to see, how did they compensate for this? How did they make this work? Where did they put the comb? How did they curve it and bend it? And how long have they been there? How did they survive? All of that. I'm constantly learning, and it's always something new to explore and experience. And that's very exhilarating to me, because then it keeps it from becoming monotonous.
Well, it's that whole problem solving. Both of you, the colony, the superorganism is doing that. That's what you're witnessing and describing. But it's also the problem solving that you're doing. You have to really keep in mind all those parameters and kind of try to figure out what's going on the outside, the environment, and how that relates to the superorganism and what your goals are. So there's a whole lot of thinking and problem solving. And it's for people that are love the mental math and the mental exercise, this is going to keep your brains young forever. This is amazing.
Challenging. Yes, it's very challenging.
Yeah, It's
So there you
addictive.
go. Those are the three main questions. The last question would be, in a wrap up, what advice would you have to give to new beekeepers?
Couple, work with others, as in bee pods. I call those bee pods. So don't get started by yourself. But I would say the main and most important one is go for avoid following the advice from commercial beekeepers. Really be discerning in what you hear, and according to your goals, find the sources of information that will fit that goal. You have to think first what kind of hive you're going to want, what kind of beekeeping style you're going to want. That's going to inform what kind of hive you're going to get. And also realize that there's a whole lot of information that's geared towards commercial beekeeping that you do not have to do, right? So that's why it's so much easier to go with natural beekeeping, in my opinion, because oh, here's a big one: get good bees, treatment-free bees that are local to your area. That's the biggest piece of advice that I probably would give a brand new beekeeper. That's the key to success.
You would be very proud and probably extremely shocked that that was one of Ken's final parting thoughts, was find someone like myself that you can ask, where can I get bees from my area? And find those breeders that do local bees like you guys do, and use the swarms and the local genetics, and as opposed to going and buying all the packages, which is what he did for multiple years in a row.
Yes. And those bees are going to be local and adapted and resilient because they're surviving on their own. They might not all come from feral or wild stock. They might be escaping from managed apiaries and be treated. But, you know, they're still local, and they might still do good for you, and you might still observe them. And at that point, you can decide at that point what you want to do. But if you are going to go and purchase bees, get them from reputable local treatment-free beekeepers for the highest chances of success. And I would say go to bee-mindful.com/resources for a map of local providers in North America.
That's right.
We're adding more suppliers every time.
That is an awesome actual resource to have out there as well. And for everybody listening, in case you're new to the Patreon episodes and you've not heard it before and you didn't necessarily see the post, because there is a post out there that is open to the public, but in case you didn't see it and you're ever curious about the Top Bar Hive plans, you can go to bee-mindful.com/plans, and you can find the Top Bar plans there as well, and download them, use them. Absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
I'm glad that you remember the URL. I try to make it super easy.
Well, that's good. I actually give it out constantly.
Yeah.
There's always somebody that's writing in that maybe doesn't listen on Patreon or didn't see the post on social media. And they're like, hey, I would really love to do a Top Bar. Do you have a plan? And I'm like, yep, here you go. Be mindful. Les Crowder and Nathalie, they got this amazing thing here. It's all done. It's all lined out. Use this.
We have a video now that shows one of our customers taped himself and made a really nice video that he posted on YouTube on how to make them. So he's cutting them, assembling, and all that stuff. I'm going to make another one with even more details, like really like educational, how to from A to Z. And it's going to have also how to do the conversions from Langstroth and all kinds of stuff. So
very cool. I definitely look forward to that. My parting words for anybody getting started in beekeeping or even in just their first year of beekeeping is very simply, beekeeping is beekeeping. Do not worry about the containers and do not worry about the shapes and the sizes and the depths and the dimensions. Beekeeping is beekeeping. So learn the core of beekeeping and apply it to your situation. And if you're the only person in an area that wants to do a specific style, maybe you want to do a lay-ins, or maybe you want to do a top bar and everybody around you does Langstroth, don't let that defeat you, because it's still beekeeping is beekeeping. You're going to be looking for the same things in your colony that those other people are looking for. You're going to be managing, for the most part, the same exact scenarios. It's just going to be a different shape. And that's all there is to it. So don't overcomplicate it. Don't feel like you can't do something because it's not what everybody in your area is doing. And always take everything, even the stuff that you hear on the show, because I have tried as much as I can to try and make things as universally open as possible and give you different options to say, well, if you're in this area, you could try this, but if you're in that area, you should try that. Or ultimately you could just do this instead, and to do it in plain English. So anytime you read a book, anytime you see a posting, there may be a kernel of information in there that may apply to you, but always take it with a grain of salt and keep in mind your environment, your weather patterns, your time of season, and your specific bees. Because you can have people just a few blocks away from each other, and what works for the one doesn't for the other, and vice versa.
So the moral of the story is tune into the nature of bees.
Ah, that's exactly right. So how do you know what you need to do in your colony? You need to look inside the colony and see what the bees are doing. Are they bringing in nectar? I don't know. Look inside the comb and see what they're doing. Are they bringing in pollen? I don't know. Look at the colony and see what they're doing. But you eventually, that's how you learn. That's exactly it. That's how you learn, is because, and that was one of the things that I spent 1.5 years trying to beat into Ken's head. And it finally became a joke with him, but he still wouldn't go out there and do it. And he would constantly ask me, do I need to be feeding right now? And the answer always was,
it depends.
I don't know. Did you look inside your colony? You have to know what's going on. But once you learn the ebb and flow of your bees and also the ebb and flow of your environment, then you can answer your own questions, and it's going to be specific to you and to your area. You know, people up north have to wrap their colonies and they need more honey than people in the south that don't have to wrap their colonies. But at the same time, if you wrap your colony in the south, you actually provide insulated value. So you didn't do any harm. You know, there's like all these different aspects to it that can kind of go hand in hand. But yeah, beekeeping is beekeeping, no matter what aspect you're looking at it from.
Yep. And then be educated about what the superorganism does and its cycles and why they do things the way they do.
Be a beekeeper, not a bee haver.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in for our first new episode here on Patreon, where we're kind of going with this new format. To speak for myself and Nathalie both, we really appreciate it. And we look forward to apparently seeing you or you listening to us here again in the near future. We'll have another episode out next week, so look forward to that. And until then, everybody, be good.
Be mindful.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This Hive Jive production was made possible by amazing patrons like you, and we appreciate your support. To all our Hive Jive junkies out there, you truly are the bee's knees.